Open Access Renewables, Finding the Next Big Opportunity. This session would discuss key states, consumer considerations, and policy outlook for open access renewables. Ms. Sangeeta Suresh, Associate Director, would set the context for the discussion and moderate this session. The panelists are Mr. Manish Narula, Senior Director of Business Development, Jinko Solar, Mr. Nishant Raj, Senior Business Development Manager, Radiance Renewables. Nishant will also be sharing a short presentation with us on the topic. Ms. Pallavi Bedi, Partner, Luthra and Luthra Law Offices. Mr. Arvind Bansal, CEO of Continuum Green Energy. And Mr. Animesh Jain, Director and Finance Head, Global R&D at Cipla. Please send us your questions for the session in the chat box. We will try to answer them towards the end of the discussion. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you, Ankita. Thank you, everyone in the panel, for being here, and also thank you, all the audience who are here today. So it's been a wonderful session since morning. We've had a lot of discussion about policies. We've had a lot of discussion about open access and rooftop related issues with consumers, how 100% RE can be achieved, etc. I'm afraid we might be repeating ourselves a little bit, but I think some topics I think deserve to be spoken about more than once, so we will do so. So today the session we are talking about is about open access renewables. We've been working extensively in this area, and I want to quickly share sort of set the stage for today's session, and then we can take it forward from there. I have a lot of experienced people on our panel, so I will let them take the lead after that. So just a very quick reminder about where we are in India right now as far as open access renewables goes. So as you can see on my screen here today, this is the how the landscape for open access has been in India since 2016. It might look like a little bit of a roller coaster, but the graph implies a little bit. There's much more to this graph than what you see here. So it is a market that has been predominantly driven by states and their policies, how attractive they have been in the past, and of course consumer demand and grid savings has played a definite role, but the policies of the states, how friendly they've been, incentives have been the key driver. So basically, if you have seen historically, the market moved from state to state. The big example here is 2018, where we saw a huge 1+ gigawatt addition in Karnataka just before all the very attractive, before the attractive incentives were wrapped up. So that year is a bit of an anomaly, a big blip there. But other than that, the annual capacity addition has been in the range of 600 to 700 megawatts for solar, and in the ballpark of 250 to 300 megawatts for wind. That's been the slow capacity addition that we've been seeing. So on the whole, a gigawatt capacity has been added for open access renewables year on year in the last 5 to 6 years. This is the biggest part of corporate renewables in India. The biggest chunk comes from here. The total installed capacity is estimated around 12 gigawatts, of which totally solar has about 4.5 to 5 gigawatts, and the remaining is wind. And most of the wind was historical capacity addition when accelerated depreciation was around, and most of it was in the southern states. So this discussion today is about what next. What next, both in terms of immediate near term, and those answers are to some extent clear. The policies which are there right now, which are very attractive in a few states, as well as the untapped demand. A combination of these two things make a few states very, very attractive. That is your Gujarat, your Maharashtra. They have very high industrial consumer market, and they have, in case of Maharashtra, you have good high grid tariffs, so open access is very impressive savings. Gujarat, again, very attractive consumer market, completely untapped. However, there is a bit of a savings issue because the grid tariffs are not so high. And then there is the newly new states that are coming into the foray. That is Uttar Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, whose policies are interesting. They're opening up. Market is definitely untapped, but again, it has a few issues in terms of teething troubles, capacity of the institutions that are implementing them, etc. So there are a lot of things to discuss about it. It is a complicated market. It varies from state to state, and it needs very, very special skills to really succeed in with so many variations. So that's where we are at in the near term, and we will discuss today what it means in the long term as well. Is it sustainable? Is it practical to go from state to state as the opportunity opens for developers? Is it a scalable model in the shape and form it is now? That's what we are here to discuss, and a bit of suggestions on where we could go next. So I'll leave it there, and there will be a little bit more of deep dive into what state-specific, what do I mean when I say state-specific attractions from Nishant. I'll hand it over to him before we open it up into a full panel discussion. He will walk us through some of the more positive stories of each of the states to see where things are headed in the near term. Over to you, Nishant.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you for the insightful story there. Just to build on can I just share my screen?
Sure.
I would just like to build on the story which Sangeeta has built right now and try to deep dive and give you more useful insights from Pan India and the market which has opened up. So if you see, continuing on to what Sangeeta has just mentioned on the interesting states and go-to states when it comes to power and open access and the kind of consumer and the gentry which we have. We have always known that Tamil Nadu was one of the first early adopters when it comes to adoption of solar, and CNI had a major role to play in that. Tamil Nadu CNI market is about 41%. The entire consumption of renewable is represented from 41% of CNI consumers. The share of open access in CNI itself is 46%. So you can talk about volumes in Tamil Nadu market. Nearly 1/5 of power also is contributed from wind. So southern part of Tamil Nadu was one of the very wind-friendly area where few initial setups were done. Now, when we talk about other states which are interesting, which were early movers, which still makes sense for us, which still makes sense for the industry to consider, are Karnataka. Again, the state has one of the highest penetration when it comes to RE, 35%. And the CNI consumers account for approximately 30% of the entire consumption. CNI consumption is basically half green and half distributed in open access wind.
Yeah.
Now, Karnataka is one market where grid tariffs are quite high, and it makes sense for people and customers to explore open access and renewable specifically. Among the newly opened markets, we have UP, Uttar Pradesh, which has recently opened and which has recently come up with the renewable policy. Right now, UP has penetration of just 4% when it comes to renewable. Their CNI consumers, we have slightly less CNI consumers in UP, but CNI consumers do account for 28% consumption when it comes to discom power sales. And just 3% of those consumers are considering renewable for their consumption right now. The state has come up with a lot of attractive open access charges exemptions, which makes it very attractive. The state is also providing 50% exemption on billing and transmission charges. Coming to the state which is very active on the renewable platform right now, which is Maharashtra. The state itself has set a ambitious target of 25 gigawatt in terms of renewable targets by 2022. Now, the state has very active participation from CNI consumers, accounting to 44% right now. Only 5% of the CNI power consumption is from renewable. So this gives us a lot of scope to go ahead and pitch our products in CNI market. Maharashtra also has one of the highest grid tariffs in the country, and hence open access renewables makes much more sense for customers. Coming to Gujarat, like we all know, Gujarat is the only state in India which has a defined wind solar hybrid policy. And that is one area which can be explored. Gujarat currently has installed capacity of 9 gigawatt solar and 11 wind. CNI presence in the state is approximately 58% when it comes to consumption in the discom power sales.
Nishant, sorry, I think, I don't know if it's just me, but your voice keeps dropping. Maybe if you could be.
Is it the same with everyone? Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now.
It is better now. I think. Yeah.
Sorry. So I was talking about Gujarat as a state where CNI consumers, they account for 58% of the total discom power sales, and one of the highest when you talk about the national average. But still, only 3% of total CNI consumption is renewable. So hence Gujarat is one state which can be explored, and specifically for wind solar hybrid. Although wind solar hybrid has its own challenges in terms of capacity and planning and the open access charges when it comes to it. But Gujarat is again one of the key states which can be targeted. There are a lot of incentives being proposed by different states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, UP, where Tamil Nadu has allowed for banking for monthly banking, and they have also offered to purchase excess power at 75% of the APBC rate. Also, they have been offering incentives in terms of 50% exemption on transmission charges, billing, 30% exemption on CSS and other charges. Likewise, Karnataka, they also allow for 6 months banking as of now, but there has been a discussion going on to reduce it to 1 month. That will be in line with the state movement, or basically movement of all the discoms towards standardizing the banking part. However, as of now, we have 6 months banking on offer, and the state also buys surplus power at 85% of the generic tariff. Mm-hmm. Now, state also provides a lot of incentives when it comes to solar power. Coming to UP, which has also allowed monthly banking, and we can procure, so the discom is procuring surplus power at 2 rupees, or the PPA tariff. So that also takes care of any surplus power which is unused because of banking limitations and challenges. Yeah. UP is also offering 50% exemption on billing and transmission charge. Likewise, we have states like Maharashtra where banking is allowed for 1 year and deemed purchase for banked power up to 10% of the generic tariff. In Maharashtra, there is no specific incentive to industries. However, there are few industries like data centers where there are few benefits being offered, like ED benefits for 10 years. So these states, and Gujarat, we already spoke about the open access wind solar hybrid. So these states have been proving very potent and very important states when it comes to solar power planning. Radiance has been following on the lead and the footsteps, and this is our pan-India presence. We currently operate approximately 240 megawatt of solar power plant across India. If you look at the footprint, we have a uniform presence across the country. Currently, we are having a 70 megawatt of power plant under construction, and we also have executed some 200 megawatt of PPAs. Additionally, Radiance has presence in approximately every major state through our solar park presence, where we have a combined capacity of 650 megawatt across Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, UP. We also are entering into Gujarat and Chhattisgarh in line with the newly states which has opened up for renewable, which Sangeeta was recently mentioning. So that basically echoes with the sentiment on the new states and the states which are still proving very worthy and needs to be considered and potent for companies or developers like us to venture out and seek more and more consumers. Typical case study here is how solar power can help you reduce your carbon footprint at the same time reduce your power consumption cost. So a classic case of automotive company in Karnataka where they are contracting 18 million units annually through us. We are replacing their discom units up to 75% and thus reducing their carbon footprint by 14,000 tons every year. That also leads to saving up to 125 lakh units, cubic meters for every year. That is in comparison to thermal source of power. This also gives a great visibility on the price point for entire PPA tenure, which is 25 years. And this gives a good base for planning. Talking about the client base which Radiance has right now, we are serving a lot of marquee customers in India, right from Indian Railways to Toyota, to HL, to Decathlon, to name a few. Avasource is basically a company which is owned by Green Growth Equity Fund, which is basically managed by Everstone Capital. We have anchor investment from Riverstone, a UK-based fund, Lightsource BP, one of the largest renewable player in European market, NIIF, and FCDO, which is Foreign Commonwealth Development of the Government of UK. We are one of the fastest growing renewable company in India. We have recently started our operation in 2018, and we have already achieved half a gigawatt of portfolio, and we are planning to reach to 1.5 gigawatt in next couple of years. So that's a brief about organization, and that's a brief about all the interesting states we can target as a solar developer. Thank you. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very, very quick capturing of the current, a little bit more detail about each one of the states. So that was quite useful and saved me a lot of time. Thank you, Nishant. So I'd like to I'll come back to you, Nishant. I do have a few questions about some of the states that you're talking about, and very interested to note the 75% RE penetration that you're able to show in some of as a case study. So I'd like to come back to that. But before that, I'd like to speak to Animesh, who is one of the consumers on our panel here today. Animesh, Animesh is from Cipla, and one of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturing companies. I do know you have sustainability goals. You have a target by 2030, if I'm not wrong, to be carbon positive as a group. So that's a very, very lofty target. I would at the onset like to understand what your short-term, medium-term goals are and how much you've been able to achieve so far. And then we could talk a little bit more about it from that point.
Yeah, thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'll share my experience from Cipla point of view, and the view expressed in this conversation would be limited to our personal views. So with that caption, I'll start. Cipla has been focusing on a sustainability agenda, and there are set roadmaps in terms of carbon footprint, water neutrality, and the other thing is the zero waste to landfill. That is what is in the targets there, and there is a mechanism internally, a review mechanism in terms of sustainability council there's a governance mechanism, and there are progresses have been are being tracked internally. Now on this front, on a carbon footprint, basically in pharma industry, the power consumptions are high. And even the power cost is considered to be a kind of, one of the highest contributor in total OPEX expenditures. And we started, this journey of renewable energy procurement around 3.5 years back. Started with a kind of, first of all, covering our rooftops with solar rooftops across our sites in India. We have a presence in around 6 to 7 states in India. And then, then there was an opportunity, as you mentioned, in Karnataka in 2018. And we also, took initiative to tie up for the capacity in terms of third-party open access in Karnataka for our two manufacturing units. And last 3 years, we have been successfully, able to replace around 90% plus power consumptions for our manufacturing units in Karnataka to the renewable sources in combination of solar and wind. Mostly solar, a part of is also being taken through wind. So that's what we started in Karnataka. Then the next step was in setting up a captive open access project in Maharashtra. I think we were the very first one to take an initiative along with our partner to set up the captive open access project. And that got commissioned somewhere in December 2020. And last 9 odd months, we have been successfully getting the power supplies from those plants, from that plant. And that is helping us around 55% of our requirement to our renewable sources for our manufacturing units in Maharashtra. That's what the journey till date. It's approximately around 48 megawatt of capacity. In terms of solar, we have added in last 3 years, And we have a plan going forward, to augment our capacity, try out some wind solar hybrid options in Karnataka, moving from a third party to maybe a captive open access, which is, is a more of a long-term and stable one. And also looking forward to some kind of a hybridization in Maharashtra. Considering, there's a limitations with solar to the percentage you can replace the power, your power. Pharma industry have moreover, 24/7 even consumptions. And that's a way, and there are banking rules, there are set of rules. So monthly settlement and TOD rules. Considering all of that, I think wind solar hybrid is something which can take us from say 50-55% in solar to 80-85% when we do wind solar hybrid. So we are looking out these options across our, across the sites. That's what, and we have been actively working with our partners. I think the market has opened up well. There is a maturity in terms of, offering from the partners. Also, there are still, there are regulatory hassles bit here and there. But I think if puts perseverance, if one puts up consolidated effort, then there is a way out.
Okay.
That's what on my end.
Thank you. I think I'm going to pick up from the last thing you said, perseverance. So that is something that you really need in this sector. So I think it would, I would like to understand a couple of things from you. You are in Karnataka and Maharashtra. So but you said you are present in 6 or 7 states. So what are the other states? And may I know at what level of, where are you at planning for new plants in those states?
So, I think, I'll also pick up from the importance, sentence, which is perseverance, because, there is no set formula, which, you can pick up from the book or pick up from the net and, implement. That's not how the renewable energy adoptions work. Each state has unique policy. There are, consumption pattern, generation pattern, and then there is a, financial viability, and also, there's a long-term planning which requires.
Yeah.
So that's the reason, you need a good amount of perseverance, and it takes a good amount of time to come through a solution which is a tailor-made for each of the industry, each of the consumer.
Yeah.
Now, if you ask about, we have done Maharashtra, Karnataka, I spoke about, we have large presence in the state of Goa. So we have one of the biggest manufacturing facility in Goa. And one of the oldest one as well. So that's where we are looking at. Goa has its own challenge in terms of, because there's no presence as of now, even for renewable energy or other source of power generations. So there's a bit of, challenges and the clarity in terms of policies and the implementation of the policies more so. That's what, we are looking for Goa. And there are other states like, we have presence in Indore, but that is in SEZ zone. Yeah. So SEZ zone has a subsidized power. And probably at the moment, open access power doesn't work in that scenario. We have a presence also in Bedi and Sikkim. Bedi is a Himachal Pradesh. So that's also, we are looking at some open access there. Maybe not in terms of solar or wind, if some kind of a mini hydro. And then I think Sikkim has limitation. It will take a while to, that state to open up and come to a kind of a state of power. The power situation in the state has to, improve before it gets into the open access mode.
Got it. So basically you are looking at these 3 states, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Goa. So that is this thing. So before I go on to developers and ask them questions, I would like to understand from you how you did persevere, in the sense that your core business is not the regulatory policies and open access policies or contracting power or even setting up power, because you do say you have captive power plants, so not generating power. So what was your strategy when 3 years ago when you decided to take this forward, and how were you informed, or was it a lot of maybe sort of hits and misses on the way as well? How did it go?
I think, what we did it, I think as you said, rightly said, I think our core business is, in the drug manufacturing. Yeah. And that's what we are good at. So, when it came to the, strategizing the renewable energy procurement, we thought of, choosing the right partners. And we wanted to go in not in any of the captive mode. So any of the projects which I have mentioned, we choose not to go 100% captive mode. We thought of, having a right partner who can help us, who has a stake and, kind of, who can go along with us in a long-term basis. So that's what the first step is, finding the right partners. The other thing what we did is that we had multiple options, and we thought of picking up the models which are scalable.
Yeah.
So we started in the rooftop with couple of sites and then scaled up to across the sites. Open access also, we started with a third party open access, which is of a less riskier and less commitment demands. And we went ahead to the Maharashtra captive open access, and now we are trying out the wind solar hybrid options in the Karnataka and Maharashtra. So I think there's a own learning curve which an organization has to go through, along with the the developers and the partners. And I think that's that can step by step we can build it. It cannot achieving say RE40, RE50 or RE100 target cannot happen overnight.
Yeah,
it requires a long commitments from the organization.
Yeah. That makes sense. It does make sense. And your RE penetration has steadily been growing. I see 55% in one state, 90 in another. So that's very heartening numbers to hear about. So in as I speak about RE penetration, I think I would first start about the solar angle alone. Manish, I would like to ask you this question. Consumers like Animesh, how would they go about identifying how would they know how to maximize the potential of open access solar? And could you talk to us about the modules, what the role of modules, has the technology landscape evolved in the past that can help consumers make a decision to maximize the RE penetration?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this question. I think the times are very interesting for solar because particularly, Indian government has given a lot of boost to the policies and to the targets for the coming future. And Jinko is also taking it very positively in terms of supporting the India, national plan, as well as, not only the implementation of the solar, but also how to, enhance the manufacturing and, grow along with the national growth. So on both accounts, Jinko is also planning its own, long-term, systematic and sustainable policies. Coming to your question, what we have seen in this market so far is that open access or C&I clients are lagging behind, same as what we have seen in rooftop segment as well. These are the segments which need a lot of courage, a lot of direct investments, and these are unlike those utility scale projects where you have a strong support from government PPAs or those kind of direct involvement of SECI and MNRE. Here people have to take a lot of risks, and sometimes the PPAs are also for short term, maybe 10 years or so. So it calls for a different type of business model. What Jinko is doing in this case is Jinko is supporting all those clients who have these kind of investments in C&I segment and particularly in open access, because some of them are also captive. Those who are using for their own, like a cement company or, for example, a steel company who have their own targets, who have their own captive requirements, and they have spare land available. So they are working on their own site, and there is no challenge for them to go for those kind of open access or across the state or banking. But those with the type of third-party open access, I would say OPEX models, they need a lot of support from manufacturers like us. So we are supporting all those players, wherein the market is getting slightly better tariffs because these are triple rated companies or these are small term PPAs. They are getting slightly better tariffs, and Jinko has taken up a step forward to support them by way of offering them high efficiency products. High efficiency in the sense that the conventional market may not be so keen to go for high efficiency because of cost reasons, because of the tariff is hovering around 2 rupees or 225 or so. So those utility players do not care much about the efficiencies, much about the high level quality. But these C&I players, open access players, they have this kind of concern, especially the people who are having OPEX model, because they have to own the business and they have to sell the power to those players. So there is a definite need and demand for high efficiency. And Jinko is always offering them high efficiency panels. Also, we are offering them all the upcoming technologies. Here, I would like to add, and I'm sure my colleague during the day session had already touched upon this point, but we have seen India is lagging in terms of technology adoption. In a sense that when market has moved from polysilicon to mono silicon products, entire Europe, US had already adopted to it. India was still pushing for, accepting polycrystalline modules. Very recently, in last 2 years, we have seen all the developers and other investors have come up with monocrystalline modules. Similarly, now we have seen there is still a hesitancy in terms of accepting bifacial modules.
Yeah.
Bifacial has been more than 50% of market share in US and Europe markets, whereas in India, it is, I think, still less than 10 or 15%. So these kind of high-end technical products are welcomed by open access and C&I players because they can gain maximum generation from a fixed land or a fixed capex. And that's where Jinko is also giving them a specific allocation from our factories, where utility players are not so keen to go with those kind of high technology and high efficiency products. Open access market and C&I players are easily welcoming those models, and it is really fitting very well in their feasibility study, and investors and lenders both are welcoming these kind of technologies. So this is the limited point of view I want to give in terms of technology, in terms of the acceptance by the markets. I will touch upon other points as and when the next question arises. So that was my limited take on this.
Sure. Thank you. That was useful. And I think that is the point that a lot of people are trying to make, that, the technology landscape is shifting, and it is very good for technology suppliers to be in a market that is accepting of it. It is too cost competitive. Otherwise, Indian market
Exactly.
is quite, but this is one segment which can be a little bit of an exception. So that is an interesting point. So I'm coming at this from an RE penetration point of view, Manish. So the other point that Animesh was talking about was to maximize is to go hybrid. So at that, to that, I'd like to take the question to Mr. Arvind. So Arvind, I thank you for being here, and that's what Animesh said must have been a little bit of music to your ears, because the wind solar hybrid market is what you have planned for in advance, if I understand right. So the potential is very good. But I'd like to ask you a few specific questions, because a lot of people are saying, yes, wind solar hybrid is the next big thing. Gujarat has come up with a new policy. Karnataka has the potential. But what is it in your view? What is the real potential? And when I say real, I'd like to understand from you the real definition of wind solar hybrid, not the kind where it is located in two different places and power is fed in different places and it's called as wind solar hybrid. We would like to know what is the real potential of wind solar hybrid that can maximize RE penetration and also take care of transmission infrastructure at the same time. So maximize the transmission infrastructure as well. So over to you, Arvind. Arvind, are you there?
And
Sorry,
it was a pleasure. Yeah, can you hear me?
We can
Am I audible now?
We can now, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Sakita. Thanks for having me on this session.
Arvind, I'm afraid you're connected.
Animesh talking about the RE initiatives and.
Arvind, I'm afraid your connection is a little unstable. The network seems to be a little unstable.
Is it okay now? Can you hear me?
Well, you are quite blurred, but we can try again.
Okay, so, indeed, as Animesh said, wind solar hybrid is interesting. And to directly address your question, what is a true wind solar hybrid?
Animesh, is it?
One is
Arvind?
there is some challenge
Terribly
suddenly at
sorry.
my end.
Maybe you can try to switch off the video and see that the voice improves.
That's right. I was just going to suggest that maybe we could do
Is it
without
better?
video. I think so. We can at least hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. So wind solar hybrid has essentially two values. One is from a customer perspective and the second from the grid perspective. And the true hybrid essentially achieves both of these. From a customer perspective, as Animesh mentioned, this plays to replace the highest percentage of a customer's consumption through renewable energy sources because it provides a higher level of effective plant load factor that the customer sees at its end. And the second is from a hybrid. Second hybrid advantage is on evacuation infrastructure because you don't need to build the evacuation infrastructure for the entire capacity of wind and solar, but you can design it for somewhere in between the sum total of wind and solar and the higher of the two. The advantage of a wind solar hybrid evaporates if you are connecting a wind and solar project to two different parts of the grid, because then you're not maximizing the utilization of the evacuation infrastructure. This advantage of wind solar hybrid plays very nicely in a CNI segment because the customer is limited by the amount of megawatts that it can buy. And therefore, the customer is looking at highest amount of energy availability to a given megawatt of open access requirement. So we have planned for wind solar hybrid capacity from the very beginning of our business strategy. Today, we have a 227 megawatt co-located wind solar hybrid operating in Tamil Nadu, where we are selling all of the electricity to about 50 CNI consumers. And we are converting our existing wind farm in Gujarat to a wind solar hybrid, where we are already selling about 150 megawatts of wind capacity in third-party open access spaces. And we are constructing, as we speak, another 240 megawatt wind solar hybrid there. So in all, between the two projects, between Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, we have about 150 CNI consumers.
Okay.
We sell a little over 100 crore units a year as we speak to our CNI consumers. So it's a very big market segment for us. And we are seeing a demonstrable advantage from the reception that we have with our customers of the wind solar hybrid product, because it also lent itself to an easy adoption of storage cost on a gradual basis. So in our mind, it has been a gradual move from wind farms to a wind solar hybrid and to eventually to a wind solar storage hybrid.
Okay. What level of RE penetration have you been able to achieve when you were a pure wind farm to wind solar hybrid, and what timeline do you see for storage? And what would be the dispatchable power that a consumer can expect at that point of time when the trifecta is achieved?
So substitution of a consumer's power is also dependent on banking. So in Tamil Nadu, where initially we had a fiscal year level banking, we were able to substitute in some cases as much as 80% of a consumer's power requirement through renewables. In the absence of banking on 12 months basis, but with 1 month banking, we have been able to achieve approximately 45 to 50% with a standalone wind farm. And with 1 month banking, we'll be able to achieve about 65 to 70% substitution with a wind solar hybrid. In the absence of any banking, that is where the profile risk of renewable plays out. So in the absence of any banking at all, where we're selling to several customers in Gujarat on a 15-minute settlement without any banking at all, there's on a standalone wind project, you can meet about 35%-ish.
Okay.
And with a hybrid, we'll be able to cross about 54-55% substitution.
When you say absence of banking, we're talking only the 15
15-minute settlement. That's right.
Okay, 15-minute settlement. And at 15-minute settlement, you are able to have 35% and 55% for wind and hybrid, respectively. Okay,
That's correct.
They are still impressive numbers, nonetheless, especially for wind, solar, hybrid. Okay.
Yes. So for a 24/7 consumer, in terms of pecking order, a wind solar hybrid scores best,
Mm.
followed by wind, followed by solar.
Mm.
But for a daytime commercial consumer, it's the solar which plays out best.
Mm. Mm. And the storage, what is your view on what's the timeline? Of course, we know that storage today is not really viable. Where do you see it become viable, and what would the cost savings be, assuming, I mean, if we are looking at 2 years down the line, perhaps to 2023, where storage is likely to become viable, what would it mean for the consumer in terms of savings? How much will it, do you have any thoughts on that?
See, in today's discount tariff structure, there is no significant difference in time of pay tariffs.
Yeah.
It's about 15 to 20%. So that difference does not lend itself to storage investment.
Mm.
There is no real value of adding storage with that kind of difference between peak and off-peak rates.
Mm. Mm.
So to bridge that gap, I think storage is quite some bit of time away to shift load from off-peak to peak and deliver value to the customer. So in this market, I don't see it playing out too much.
Okay.
Except for a limited opportunity where you can shift the peak daytime solar consumption production around midday to a late evening consumption from a load smoothing perspective.
Got it.
From a cost advantage perspective.
Okay. That is interesting. I will come back to you because I do have a few other questions about the potential for wind solar hybrid as well. But I would like to go back to you, Nishant. You were also had experience or plans for wind solar hybrid markets. How are you planning as a Radiance? We heard from Continuum that they have planned ahead so that the wind farms are being converted into solar farms over time. So how are you approaching it as a relatively newer player in the market?
I would like to add to Arvind's point where the future as he foresees is converting his traditional wind parks to wind solar hybrid. And just to build on to the point, he mentioned that it makes sense for supplying to the industry which has RTC demands, around the clock demands, so that we can maximize the uses of transmission corridor which we have blocked. Otherwise, just going for daytime load doesn't make sense. So hence, we are targeting specific customers with specific set of requirements. And additionally, in the current context and current scenario, it makes more sense in terms of commercial. I'm talking about makes more sense if both the off-taker and developer are connected on the ISTS network for now, considering the CTU and the STU transmission charges. So we are very specifically picking and choosing customers who have round-the-clock power, who are better off connected to the ISTS grid, specifically steel and iron companies, and maybe a few data centers. So that's coming in more handy in terms of commercial viability as well as giving maximum bang for your buck. So that has been our strategy.
I'm sorry, I lost you a little bit. You said your preference of consumers are RTC consumers who are, and then I lost you.
So essentially customers who are having RTC load.
Yes.
And also customers who are primarily connected on the ISTS network, CTU connected. CTU connected customers basically. Okay. Because it plays out more in terms of commercial viability when you have to bear both STU and CTU charges if you're connected to STU. So that also gives us an option of transmitting power from one state to other if you're connected on the ISTS network.
Yeah.
And primarily catering to clienteles like iron and steel industry. Will have a relatively flat, relatively uniform load curve, and they do work in 24 hours shift. So that's the kind of specific choices or specific pick and choose we are doing when it comes to customers, picking customers for offering wind solar hybrid.
Okay.
And like we have rightly pointed out and identified Gujarat as the potential state. Apart from that, Maharashtra and Karnataka in modern context are also coming in handy, although we do not have a defined or very aggressive hybrid policy in these states.
Yeah.
But that's the current outlook.
Okay. I think I'd like to go to Pallavi right now. Pallavi, thank you again for being here with us today. Pallavi, I was just thinking about what Animesh said in the beginning about changing their current plans from third party to captive, and there are several plans in group captive mode, which sort of brings us back to the long old, old story, old battle about captive, group captive, who's to define it, who is to find out who is captive, and can the same person penalize it, if the DISCOM has the authority to do both. There are so many petitions and so many litigations going on in this. Is there any end to this? I mean, we've discussed this a year ago. I don't think much has changed. I'd like to hear from you. Like, is there an end in sight, or is this going to be a perpetual issue where litigation is the only way to go?
Yeah, thanks, Sangeeta, and glad to participate. I think you're right. This topic has been ongoing. I think everybody's been hoping for an end in sight since 2016. Probably when the first time the amendments were kind of proposed with respect to the electricity rules. Now, I think just taking a step back, the biggest advantage of our captive power plants and group captive as envisaged by the original Electricity Act is the whole waiver of cross-subsidy surcharge. And that's what makes them that attractive and giving them the structure. Now, obviously, historically, there is, in terms of regulations, the electricity rules, which kind of lay down the whole structure of what was captive and what qualifies to be group captive, the two-fold test, this much equity, 26% equity must be there, and 51% consumption must be there. Some leeways of 10% allowed, and the checks to be done by the DISCOMs and the appropriate commissions. And that's periodic filings, etc., that you kind of need to do. Now, there has been ample amount of case law over this subject over the years, that what qualifies, at what stage do you qualify as a group captive or not. I think, and that unfortunately continues. Now, 2018, when I think the revised amendments to electricity rules came, that time, to a lot of stakeholders, it was looking that it is kind of reaching culmination and we will get to the end, where the whole structure is in a manner that it benefits all the stakeholders involved, in terms of that, okay, the need of the hour is group captive because it will help consumption and take the load off the DISCOMs as well. But unfortunately, I think somewhere what has happened over the years, the way the DISCOM market has worked as well, or the DISCOM financial position has worked, the disincentive with the DISCOMs to kind of see that the group captives are not that flourished has also kind of increased, because I think also the move has happened from an expansion in our installed capacity drastically over a period of time. Earlier, it kind of made huge sense from a DISCOM's perspective to say, okay, this load for the large industrial player is coming from group captive. I think perhaps that might be the reason why these regulations are not seeing the end of the day. And to ensure that, okay, group captive is an actual group captive, which does benefit the captive, and that's why the benefit is being afforded to the actual guys who will be kind of using the power for their consumption. But hopefully, again, I think not losing hope, perhaps it should kind of see end sometimes soon. And I think I should also add some of the state policies, the way kind of things have been moving. With respect to the cross-subsidy surcharge waiver being taken away. I remember 2017-18 when Madhya Pradesh certainly came up with a office memorandum stating that the cross-subsidy surcharge would be taken away, and everything was in a flux. But fortunately, I think within a couple of months, it was rolled back. And then similarly, I think recently even Gujarat has tried to kind of, with its new policy, which is seeming to be a positive move in everything else, but they try to kind of define group captive or just define it. Probably, I think it was more an act. I personally think of something being very loosely done, that entire consumption must be captive consumption, and they just left it at that. But fortunately, again, GRC has ruled on it and kind of said that it should be what the electricity rules 2005 kind of envisage. So hopefully, I think, and the push and pull towards the incentives with respect to the group captive and generally also the open access has been kind of ongoing for a while. With banking suddenly being taken off, even for the rooftop net metering policies being changed. Hopefully, I think things will streamline, probably with some time. And kind of, I think that's why regulatory certainty and kind of bringing out a policy after inputs from the various stakeholders and kind of factoring in, perhaps that's the way forward that the country needs. I'll stop there.
No, that is, I think you're getting started, just warmed up, I would say, start there. Because I'd like to ask this to everyone here who is involved, like from a consumer point of view, also you're in Maharashtra, I'm sure you must have heard about, did you say you have a captive plant in Maharashtra? Then they must have imposed additional surcharge, and that must be a litigation there in Maharashtra. And there is a lot of litigation in Tamil Nadu as well about the definition of who will define who is a captive plant and who will penalize it. West Bengal has come up with the same thing. But the bigger story here I would like to see is this minefield of regulations, policies, and legal issues that is not really the business of everyone in the panel except you, maybe Pallavi. So where do we see this resolve? And I'd like to hear from everyone in the panel, where if, a step like the new rules that Ministry of Power has come up with, the green access rules, there are several parts of it which are, we can get into it a little later perhaps, but there are some parts of it which ask for streamlining, standardization of application, transparency. Do you think this will see the light of day, or will it be also an Electricity Act amendment with kind of a story where it is tucked away in the files? And if it has to see the light of day, what are the steps that, where should the buy-in come from? How can we get the DISCOMs to buy in? So this is for you, Pallavi, but also anyone else in the panel.
Okay, I'll just start with some of the legal points, and then everybody, I'm sure, will be happy to kind of pitch in on that. So I think these draft rules, again, a great initiative, what definitely the clean energy, our renewable energy targets kind of need. But the way it has been drafted currently, I think a number of legal questions which I'll touch upon later. But I think more importantly, it's the question of actually the implementation of open access is something which is in the realm of the state commission, right? And they are the kind of the bodies. So the state commissions and DISCOMs are the entities which really need to implement this open access regime. And how their buy-in comes and how willing are they going to be implement is going to be completely dependent on what happens to these rules. And I think some of the things that these rules touch on, which are really good, as in moving away from the eligibility entity standard from 1 megawatt to 100 kilowatt, even doing away with the additional surcharge, bringing in the waste to energy. I think these are some of the great steps which probably, and also, so to speak, blessing the behind the meter concept, which has been around for a while, but there was always, from a purely, if I were to talk from the regulatory regime perspective and the legal perspective, there was always a question mark. But these rules bless it, so great. But unfortunately, these are rules by Ministry of Power under the realm of Electricity Act. All this needs actually to happen by way of an amendment of the mother legislation, which is the Electricity Act. So because it's a well-established provision, you can't go against the act pursuant to a delegated legislation. Rules being delegated and its well-established position have to be within the realm of the law, which is the main statute. Unfortunately, the way that has happened, and I think the Electricity Act amendments, what you were referring, since I don't know how many years, they have been talking about these amendments, but unfortunately hasn't happened. So perhaps a better step was to kind of go to the Electricity Act and make the amendments there with the buy-in of the DISCOMs and the state commissions. Because today, I think what it leaves is, it leaves the room for the state commissions to challenge it if they really want. Because delegated legislation, because the Electricity Act, Section 42, clearly gives the power to the distribution licensees to then impose this additional surcharge. Taking it away, their consensus has to be there. So, legally speaking, those are the challenges which perhaps best thought through upfront, and then implementing it is a better way forward. In terms of
Okay. Anyone else? I'd love to hear from Arvind or Nishant, your views on how do we rules or no rules? How do we streamline this process to make it convenient for both the developer and the consumer?
If I can come in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, what Pallavi said is very right. I think while there is a clarity in terms of Electricity Act 2005, what is a captive and what is, third party open access. And this group captive was a kind of a creativity for no reason. Somewhere, I think it's a 26%, 51%. That's all proportionality test. I think Maharashtra also had a similar kind of a confusion, and with a good luck, I think most of the consumer, including us, could come out of that situation, and our plants have now qualified with the captive status with 26% equity stake. So that is sorted out from Maharashtra. But I think, fundamentally what is worrying more is, if you look at the larger adoption of RE across the, states, this varying policy across the states, and that too, changing year after year, it creates a lot of uncertainty, both in terms of, developer, consumer and investor. And that's where, the adoptions are, it's inhibiting the adoption. What I believe is that, as Pallavi said, I think there are MNRE has come up with a rule. I think those rules are like, somebody, it's like, dream come true kind of a rules, which, MNRE has come up. But the problem is that these rules will again, get to the until it gets into the legislation form, implementation of those rules to the DISCOMs and to the regulatory commissions is going to be a difficult thing. We can only, verbalize this, that, the MNRE says about this, MNRE has listed about it. But I think it's legislation, which is something which can give tooth to these rules. The other thing is what I believe is, while the state DISCOMs can have an options to put up the charges which they want to do as far as the ARR, considering there are ARRs filings.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the fundamentals of rules, when it comes to the banking, when it comes to the open access capacity one can draw, considering your contract demand, there are rules related to admissible draws. There are rules related, so like, additional surcharge rule or cross subsidy rules or group captive rules. Such kind of fundamental rules should be, same across the states.
Yeah.
State should have an option to vary the charges, whether it's 1 rupees or 1 rupees 10 paisa, say particular charges. That can be the states, depending on their ARR, their filings, their losses, they can do this. But when it comes to the fundamentals, there has to be harmonization across the state.
Yeah.
That's what will help.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something, I think I've had this discussion with a couple of panelists before as well. And I'd like maybe Arvind also to chip in if you have a couple of points.
At a high level is, if you look at it, you are essentially competing with an incumbent distribution utility. And the whole thing is to take away customers from there. And the only way this situation can, be smoothly handled is if there is a neutral arbitrator to decide upon the level playing field between the incumbent and the new entrants. Today, the neutrality of the arbitrator or the regulator is not fully ascertainable. And secondly, the incumbent itself is the rule maker and the arbitrator in many cases. So if that fundamental issue is resolved, then I think we will have a level playing field. If the group captive was essentially a carve out given to us from a situation where one set of consumer had to subsidize the other, and the logic was that the consumer is setting up its own capacity, not taking capacity from the DISCOM, and therefore they should not be liable to cross-subsidize. And that is the whole logic behind waiver of cross-subsidy surcharge.
Yeah.
Whether it is one captive or group captive, that is a small detail to the issue because group captive essentially means that a number of players are coming in together to set up a captive facility. The issue is the exploitation of the loopholes in the rules by the industry. If the industry had played fair and created and actually participated in the rules with a genuine intent, as the 2018 regulations proposed, then it would be less of an issue. And in my view, the sooner the 2018 regulations are adopted, the better it is for the industry.
Well, that's an interesting point, and not one that a lot of people often make, that the fact that the loophole has been historically exploited, which is why, if I'm sure Pallavi would agree, if you see a lot of the petitions that we see, they're very, the DISCOM stance is that, it's not group captive in spirit. It is only by design, so as to avail the waivers. So in the long term, And I'm talking about really long term because tariff reforms are a while away, but gradual reduction of cross subsidy and complete waiver towards the end is the only way forward. But how far ahead is this is anybody's guess. So do you have any comments on that, Pallavi or Nishant as well?
I think just to kind of mention about the whole reduction of cross subsidy, I think with the tariff policy of 2016, actually originally when the Electricity Act came about, even that time the intent to begin with was that it will over a period of time get waived off and it will get eliminated. And that was the original language of the act, which got amended over a period of time. And the push has been, I think, with the tariff policy of 2016 as well, setting out a benchmark that it cannot be more than 20% of your tariff. That's why if you see the latest rules as well, they try to kind of limit it, that annual increase cannot be more than this, and they should eventually. That's the intent. But I think till the entire issue of the DISCOM viability and coming back to, I think, the financial position of DISCOM, as I think Arvind was mentioning as well, till that doesn't get resolved, it will be very difficult to take away the cross subsidy, because actually the whole thing is that because the DISCOMs are required to give that subsidy, they need to take it from there. Otherwise, their financial position is kind of bad, which has been bad for a while. So either the revamp probably needs to be along with the revamp of the DISCOMs, probably, be it kind of leading into another minefield of privatization of DISCOMs. But yeah, probably just doing a couple of things together to get that balance, perhaps, is the answer.
Yeah, I know. I think that is really further down. I think let me bring this back to the realm of the next year or two, a few things that can happen. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, consumers and PPA bankability. It is a buyer's market. The consumers are very keen to go green. Then, as evidenced by this conference, is so much interest, there's so much investor pressure, there is so much consumer pressure. So there is a lot of consumer interest, but the consumers in this open access market, which is an OPEX market, PPA market, the good creditworthy consumers are limited, and they do come with a little bit of bargaining power. So how is it working out in terms of PPAs? How has the PPA evolved over time? And of course, this is again for everyone in the panel. How has the consumer, termination clauses and the change in law clauses, how have they evolved over time to be able to sort of manage the expectations and the risks? The policy risks as well, the change in law to take care of all the policy risks. How has it evolved over time? And Arvind also, and Nishant, if you can tell me, how are you able to manage the risks for yourselves as well as for your consumer? I'd like to hear about it. Also, if another question tagging onto it, the length of the PPA. There are demands for shorter PPAs from a lot of consumers, 2-year, 3-year PPAs. How do you look at bankability in that context? So a little bit on this would be great.
Well, if I may add a couple of points there, Samita. Like you kind of answered yourselves, it's a buyer market. Now, buyers are essentially driving terms. And there's a limited set of A-rated or let's say investment-worthy customers, which everybody in the industry is chasing. With new companies popping up every day with a bankload of money and then trying to get a grab or share of market, it is becoming ever challenging to maintain a sanity in terms of PPA terms which are being offered to customers. Sanity of conditions and clauses being agreed upon.
Okay.
It's becoming ever challenging to maintain. A lot of people are going aggressive and offering the moon to customers. Which ideally should not be there. As a industry, we should take a conscious call on what is doable and what is not doable for the industry to survive altogether. Because essentially, one person going down and offering something and just going in market for every player there out there creates a challenging scenario, and the sustainable industry is at risk of being unsustainable right now. So that's my take on the PPA terms and conditions, and it needs to. I think there should be. Just my personal view, there can be a standard bidding document by government for private companies if it is possible. which can be the guiding document, and people can adhere to it. Or if nothing, then at least take it as a base document and build on it. It will bring in some form of structure for the larger industry to follow, and bring in much stability and sustainability in the market.
Okay. Pallavi, Arvind, do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pallavi.
Okay, I think I'll just start. I think conceptually, in terms of the open access PPAs, they cover kind of the same risks what a utility scale PPA covers. I think the only difference is that they are less regulated, with the PPA approval not required and tariffs not regulated. And also they are heavily negotiated. Like discount PPAs is, I think the amount of negotiations we've had on open access PPAs has been like any other contract and kind of carrying on for a while. But in terms of the risks, I think, and the form of the contracts, definitely the form has evolved over a period of time, with people having realized the significance and realized the importance that actually we are dealing with the development risks. We do need to provide for a fixed contracted capacity in the contract, minimum generation levels that leads into your performance levels, and then who pays, which side pays compensation in case of an excessive offtake or lesser generation. All those concepts are now kind of provided, even the termination risks. That what happens with respect to if termination happens at a particular point in time, what is the payout required to be paid? So the both parties have become that much more, I would say, conscious even for the PPA. I remember when it started, nobody wanted the PPA to be more than 10 pages or so. But now it's kind of moving on, and people kind of realizing that these clauses are kind of critical. Even the development risk, like especially from the customer's perspective, and as everyone has mentioned, it is a buyer's market. They need to ensure that the plant gets built. And there is, okay, if something happens and it doesn't get built, there are concepts of a payout that we've seen of the CPs not being met because X needs to be done, approvals needs to be made. So those structures are now seeing their way through into the PPAs. And I think two most important clauses that I'll touch upon is the whole concept of your change in law and force majeure. And I think because with respect to open access, the biggest issues has been getting these open access approvals and open access charges to kind of provide which party bears it, the charges, what are the charges known today, what happens if there is a change in law, how are we going to go about cross-subsidy surcharge. Okay, some states had given exemptions, historically I'm talking, and if that gets taken away, what happens? How do we kind of do? Is it going to be a 50-50 split, or is it going to be kind of borne by one party? So people have started putting that in the PPAs, which is I think is great, because that is which will eventually lead to disputes tomorrow. To kind of address them upfront is perhaps the answer. And then I think the last thing is your force majeure clauses. I think COVID-19, the only positive of the pandemic has been the people have realized the importance of force majeure clauses in your PPAs. And I think, fortunately, I think what I've heard of the open access market, most people have just negotiated, and nothing has really gone down the dispute route. But people have kind of realized the importance, and with negotiations thought that, okay, this is how we should address it, as against kind of going. But they've realized that force majeure actually helps both parties to contractually provide for a way out if something happens, be it not envisaged. That's the whole premise of force majeure.
Okay, so the industry is learning as we go in your...
And the PPAs have evolved, most certainly.
Okay, Arvind and Animesh, your experience, please.
Yes, at Continuum, we have approached this problem with a view that we need a very super tight PPA when you're dealing with a monopolistic customer like a DISCOM or a central procurement agency. In the C&I market, our approach has been to be reasonable, to find a way that achieves the objectives of the customer as well as ourselves, and to provide a value proposition that the customer wants rather than trying to impose a solution on the customer. So as long as we provide, and these value propositions, in our opinion, are, as Pallavi highlighted, the risk of development. If you take that off the table from a customer's perspective, if you are able to provide an economic value to the customer, you're able to provide a high degree of confidence to the customer that you will be up and there on compliances. That you don't want a customer to receive a notice of non-compliance because of what you do. And if you're transparent with the customer on what happens in your project every month-on-month basis, then I think there is always a willingness to find a solution to every problem that emerges.
Okay.
And the contract therefore becomes a secondary document. If you are providing a value proposition at which you can make your decent returns, and the customer also finds happy, they are happy to see you, to give you a cup of coffee when you visit and drop by. That's the way to make it happen rather than through enforcing through contracts.
I'm sure you're simplifying this, but I get the spirit of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, we have to realize that customer is the king, whether it's a buyer's market or seller's market.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm assuming that would be your experience too, because you said in the beginning that you had trusted partners. So I'm assuming that you are echoing this sentiment. Sorry, Animesh? I think we've lost your audio. We're unable to hear you. I'm sorry, we're unable to hear you. Okay, I think we'll. Yeah. Terribly sorry, Animesh. We've lost your audio, unfortunately. Yeah. So I think I just want to. I'm sorry, Animesh, we're really not able to hear you. But I want to just quickly summarize, and because the topic was where it's headed, and we've had a little bit of understanding about which state is coming up. So I want to quickly ask your views, all of you on the panel. We've heard a lot of this, but what is the actual potential in your view? We've been looking at a 1 gigawatt per annum market. What is your view, on how big this market can go annually? Realistic potential, and there are other challenges. Manish, there is cost. Costs have been a big issue over, especially module costs has been quite volatile in the last few months. It may be a short-term phenomena, but what does the long-term implications mean from a cost perspective? Is that going to change materially? If we can start with Manish, while you answer, if you could let me know that, and I'll take it forward to the rest of the team to sort of have your concluding remarks on what next for the market.
Yeah, Sangeeta, I think I was waiting for this question to come up because this is the hot topic. Although you see, we are a seller to the seller actually. So, but still, we are also a buyer of certain components. When it comes to the polysilicon or glass or certain other key components which goes into making of a solar panel or solar module, we still have to depend upon the back end supply chain, and that's where the whole issue comes from, because of the, I would say, inconsistent growth across the value chain. We see these kind of issues coming up. If you would see that, the way the solar market is growing, the way the potential is growing across the globe, same way the solar manufacturers, module manufacturers in particular, have also enhanced their capacities. And maybe top 4 or top 5 players globally have grown by almost 20% per annum basis, CAGR basis, right? But the same has not happened with the ancillary suppliers, be it a glass manufacturer or a polysilicon raw material or a wafer manufacturer, or for that matter, aluminum frame or backsheet manufacturer, who are the key resources for us. So if they have not grown to that extent, because of any reason, because of their own investments have not come through, because of certain, pollution checks which are required in a particular country. For example, glass industry needs to have a lot of checks on the pollution which it creates, so they cannot expand beyond a point. So those kind of inconsistent, growth has led to the increase in the prices of raw materials, which has caused us to also eventually pass on those extended costs to our buyers. And our buyers, in the sense, are perhaps EPC players, or it could be developers themselves, or directly the captive consumers, those who have direct purchasing capability. So for us, it is something which we cannot control, but we can, envisage, or we can give the outlook to our clients about, because it is a capital intensive project. So within the next six months, what is going to happen, if we are able to understand and we can put into the project cost, we can see whether it is viable or not. it is not something to do with the 10 years of PPA or where, you have a lot of uncertainties, either by government or by other entities. You do not know what may come up in the life of PPA. But here, in the case of a module as a component, at least you have a clarity. And we always take our clients into confidence, and we share all the transparent informations as we see from our management, about the change in the market dynamics in terms of demand supply curve, in terms of inconsistency and the growth of the several ancillary buyers. So that leads us to give them a clarity, a confidence, and a decision-making ability to decide how much megawatt or gigawatt they would like to invest in a particular year or a particular quarter. And that's where the whole game starts. Then it comes to the financial modeling and the capabilities of various stakeholders to decide from there. So I think it is important for a supplier to help their end user, in whichever way possible, and we are doing our bit in that.
Okay. Thank you, Manish. So Arvind and Nishant, in your view, with the cost implications, with what we discussed with Pallavi already on the policy, regulatory, legal issues, as well as turbine costs as well. There is a delay in supply these days in wind side as well. So taking all this into consideration, in the next 2 years, what do you think the annual capacity addition can realistically be? In your view, do you have a number in mind for the country as a whole?
Directionally, the trend is quite positive and quite strong. And if more states take the initiative like Gujarat has done in defining a very clear and progressive true wind solar hybrid policy, then I think we can grow in multiples of where we are today. But I don't have a specific number in mind.
Okay, Nishant?
Well, I echo the similar sentiment as in the market has been hovering around 1 gigawatt number, 1 gigawatt capacity addition year on year. And there has been a lot of policy push from different states, new entrants have come on the block. And with that understanding, I believe 10 to 15% year on year growth in terms of installed capacity is something which is doable, practically doable.
Okay. I think we'll sign off on that positive note. There's a lot to do. But there's a lot of demand as well. So let's hope this market keeps growing. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more to discuss maybe a year from now, and we can see if whatever we've spoken about so far, if it will play out or maybe it turns a little bit more positive. And let's hope for that. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Pallavi, Manish, Arvind, Animesh, and Nishant. It was a really lovely discussion, and we'll look forward to hosting you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Over to you, Ankita.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta, and thank you, panelists, for that insightful